Welcome back to the Redacted Culture Cast. My poor guest has had to listen to me talk one way before the intro and now a different way after. But the objective of this show and the objective of the Redacted Culture Cast is to continue to bring conversation into what we call gun culture, hopefully one day dissolving it completely into Americana as we address the things that we think are right and true and good. And since for many of us that does revolve around ethical questions or philosophical questions regarding the capability of violence or preparedness or individual responsibility, we tend to address these subjects with as much earnesty as we can because it has great importance to our individual lives. But as usual, I like to allow the guest to introduce yourself. Would you go ahead?
Yeah, I'm Tim Marshall. I own Defense Mechanisms. We make tactical gear, belts, plate carriers, all the nylon pouches and jackets and all that stuff. And I'm also one of the lead instructors for Defensive Elements. We do tactical training, CQB related classes, some CCW force on force type stuff. Yeah, that's me.
So let's see, defense mechanisms is the gear, and then defense elements is the training.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. Well, good. I've realized a hard segue, that the way that I say the word cool comes across as dismissive, so I apologize. That wasn't the intent. But yeah, so moving on. We as of right now, for those who are listening to the show, I don't have my calendar in front of me. Today's a bit of a movement day, but as of this time, we should be looking at season 1, Operation 2 rolling pretty steady. At this point in time, plenty of the postcards have already hit the mailbox. By the time you're listening to it, you probably have received one if you know you're expecting to. If you're not expecting to receive a postcard, well, where we get our addresses is people who've purchased merch from us or people who support the show. And currently the operation we're using for show support is redactedculture.locals.com. That's where you find us. We have a low subscription if you want to subscribe to us. Really, those proceeds go to running the show, supporting the business. And as a result of that, I have a way to get a hold of you so I can grab an address, send you a postcard, and you get started with the operations. That being said, we are looking at, by the time this goes live, we should be midway through season 1, Operation 2. And I am looking forward to seeing how that goes. But we are recording this before that happens. So that being said, Tim, so you've got two sides of the coin that you're dealing with right now. You're dealing with a gear side and you're dealing with a training side. And that and one of the things that we were talking about before the show, and one of the things that caught my attention when we met, or I thought a conversation that we started to have at SHOT Show this year was let's start with the gear question and then we'll go into the training one. You make gear. You said something to me at the show that was like, well, not all gear, not all tactical gear, tactical being that weird word, is made for special operators. Not all tactical gear is made for special operators, which I think is a phrase that can sometimes get dismissed itself. But then you followed up with it and you started talking about how you think about the stuff and the gear you're making. What does that look like? What does that mean to you when you said it's not, like, not all gear is made for special operations? Because I have my idea, but I wanted to hear yours. Now we're here actually having this talk.
Yeah, I mean, in our industry, we always say this catchphrase, right? Like mission dictates gear. And special operators typically have a very defined, direct mission set. But most of us that are, armed citizens, responsibly armed citizens, we have indirect mission sets, right? There's not something in front of us, but it's more of a, preparedness, being ready for whatever may happen. And so the gear that we need is a lot different. And I think civilians often overlook support gear. Special operators might need long range equipment for reconnaissance. They might need big chest rigs and belt systems, LBE size stuff, 3-day packs, large rucks, right? Well, I don't need any of that stuff in my truck to respond to an active shooter if I'm at the mall with my family, right? But what I do need is, along with my rifle, I always need supplemental gear. I need a sling on my rifle. I need some sort of way to carry some additional ammo, and I need medical, right? And so not using the exact same gear that a special operator would use doesn't necessarily serve an indirect mission set like I would have. And so I think every individual really has to look at what is it that they're preparing for and what gear is actually necessary for that.
Yeah, in that, I definitely agree with you on that part. Being a citizen or being a civilian, I don't have a deployment schedule ahead of me where I know what region I might be in, even if you're on a rapid deployment kind of thing. I don't really have a target set in front of me. I don't have the infrastructure of the military to support all of my auxiliary needs like food, maintenance, sleep, whatever. But it is that mission that's probably the biggest lacking thing, and it's not lacking in a negative sense. It's not the same. And so, um, how have you well, like, what does that look like in some of the pieces of gear that you guys have made? Like, how have you seen how have you drawn inspiration and drawn pools from different stuff? Like, how did that come to pass?
Yeah, typically the way that I design gear is through either recognizing something that's missing in the gear that I already own, or through training and realizing the limitations either of the gear that I've designed or the gear that I bought, and designing the solution to those limitations. Right. So, Army Rangers might not benefit from concealable ankle-borne medical kit, but that's something that makes a lot of sense for an everyday concealed carrier. The likelihood of us needing to use medical in our regular lives is exponentially higher than having to use a firearm, and we would never leave home without a firearm. But we often overlook the need to carry medical, and so it's that kind of processing, right? Like I've trained a lot in CQB. I train a lot with centrifuge training in vehicle CQB a number of years ago. I took their class a bunch of times, and it just kind of shows you what you need your gear to do, right? I don't personally, I don't re-index mags a lot in three-dimensional training, right? Flat range training is the world where you like shoot, reload, re-index, reset, shoot, reload, re-index, reset. But in three-dimensional training, where you're moving around vehicles, you're moving around a bunch of people, you're moving in and out of structures, re-indexing magazines becomes this very low priority task. And so a lot of the magazine pouches that I make don't have kydex. And this is just one simple example of designing gear around a mission set versus around a convenience, right? A lot of the magazine pouches I make don't have kydex inserts, which means they're not as easy to re-index as kydex inserted pouches. People constantly complain to me about this. They can't re-index their magazines as easily. But what is immediately clear to me is that all of their training is in an artificial environment for artificial purposes, with this artificial need of very fast and quick and convenient re-indexing of magazines, which is not is a much lower priority when the mission is to defend your family and your home, to make it out to your vehicle in evacuate, right, in a home invasion scenario, to get out of the mall and an active shooter, get to your car, right? Like re-indexing magazines becomes a really, really low priority in the reality of that execution of that indirect mission set, where it's a really high priority in training on a flat range, right? And so that's the kind of thinking that we try to apply to gear, and realize what is actually designed to be used for versus how we use it when we stand on the flat range. That type of stuff.
Yeah, so I can think of like two ways. I'm listening to you talk, and I'm thinking about, well, I'm supposed to be actively listening, but at the same time, I'm kind of thinking about how would I respond to this. And as I'm going through this, I'm watching two sort of habitual lines of thought kind of come back into response, and one of them is, well, what happened? And this is going to have to, unfortunately, I got to flesh this all out. One of them being well, what happens if I'm in a scenario where I would have wanted to re-index a magazine? Now I can't. Right. And this is this idea where like, okay, and I'm going to, and this is the what if response. The what if there's two responses that I think are a little bit canned. And I understand that. And I'm trying to I want to define them and then move away from them. And the what if response is you tell me that you designed something for this purpose, for this thing, and I give you a what if response, which turns into, well, what if I'm in an environment where I might be I might need more rounds, and so it would have been better if I could have re-indexed that half-loaded magazine, because I could have come back down to the two. I'd rather have it, not need it, than need it, not have it, kind of thing. And then the other response is the special operations response, which is well, I remember when I was in special operations, I was always frustrated at the mags with flaps because it was difficult to re-index a magazine, and eventually moved towards something that allowed me to easier re-index. And so, and both of these responses are why I'm using them as canned responses is because I'm kind of acknowledging that as our whole culture has shifted, these sort of responses don't have as much purchase anymore. They don't have as much value because one, that we've kind of figured out the what if, for a what if response to be valid, it has to be coming from somebody who has already established goodwill. And that typically isn't the case. Most of the times when I see what if responses, it's somebody trying to like outsmart you kind of a way. And it's like, okay,
Devil's
we're not,
advocate.
yeah, right. It's like, okay, you're not being the devil's advocate. You're just being the devil. You're just being an asshole kind of thing. And then the special operations one is a little fuzzy because it's like, dude, there's a lot of dudes in special operations and they have a lot of different opinions about a lot of different things. And sometimes there are principles and sometimes you break those rules and whatever. So back to a piece of gear. Even if I would not personally want to buy a pistol mag, you're going to use a pistol mag pouch, right? For my belt, and my belt is my current belt setup right now is very overt. There's no covert nature to it. It's not like if I'm putting that onto in an environment where I'm having to use it for what it's designed for, we're talking about a very bad day, probably a very bad week. So that is one mentality. But I'm thinking about even like on the EDC side, that is 100% my weakness. There are things that I don't carry because they're not convenient to me. We had a conversation with Gorilla Tactical about like med kit stuff. It's like, oh, I just don't carry it because it's not convenient enough. And I want to see how you've tackled some of those. And then you were talking before on like some law enforcement questions, because I think there's a big philosophical and cultural relevance to how similar to special operations should law enforcement be. But let's start with the EDC gear. What's some examples of EDC gear where you found holes and plugged them effectively?
Yeah, I mean, with EDC stuff, it's easy for us all to get kind of complacent, right? I live in the safest town, in the safest state, in the safest country in the world, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy to get complacent with that stuff. Lately, I find myself leaving medical in my truck, right? I have a big blowout bag in my truck for mass casualties. Most likely, it's for car accident, right? I've used it before coming up on a car accident, pulling people out of rollover, that kind of stuff. So I keep a mass casualty bag in my truck, and I have ankle medical in my truck as well. If I'm someplace where I just feel like I need to plus up my EDC. But typically, if I'm going to work and driving back and forth to home, yeah, I don't carry all that stuff all the time. But I want to have the option to do so. And so simple pouches that can be worn tight against your belt, under a t-shirt, or inside the waistband, that can carry OC spray or ankle medical type rig that we do. That kind of stuff it's nice to have that available, and you can add or subtract it based on your needs, right? If I'm running back and forth to the office every day, well, probability says that I probably don't need that stuff immediately on me. So, I'm not going to fault you if the back and forth to the office is you're carrying minimal EDC. Maybe it's a pocket pistol, maybe it's whatever that looks like. For everybody makes those decisions, right? But I also think it's important to have some kit necessary to plus that up when you go to environments that are strange to you, that are new, that you don't have as much control or experience in. And that's kind of that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at making gear that's really easy to add or subtract to your kit. A lot of our pouches, you can snap them on a belt via one wrap. You can pull them off if you don't need them anymore. But a lot of what we make is more for the overt side. Very little. Our ankle medical is about the only really covert product that we offer. Most of the stuff we do is on the overt side, because that's where because realistically, most people don't carry. They don't carry a lot of stuff covertly. And I think all of us, potentially, if we're honest, probably have been lazy with that. There's probably more that we should and could do, but it's not convenient, and so we don't do it.
Yeah, so I recently picked up one of those little flipper devices, and if you've seen one of those, it's like this. It's basically like a digital lockpick concept. I'm going to describe it really poorly, and a lot of people are going to be a lot of people can criticize me for my Midwestern approach to this idea of the this flipper zero, and it allows you to kind of like basically copy and repeat different forms of signals that are produced, whether it's like an RFID or maybe something that your car, like a signal that your car key fob will produce, or like your garage door opener if you unlock it a certain way, and then you can got to be careful with all these issues. So I picked one up, and like when I learned how to pick locks, it kind of opened up the world out there. You see all these options out there. You're like, oh my goodness, I can get so much further. But then it made you think about all of your vulnerabilities. And so I'm thinking about adding a piece of kit changes how I perceive the world a little bit. For example, I guarantee you that if I tomorrow put on a carried a EDC'd every time I left my house, I carried a plussed up med pouch with me, I would actively see more light. I'd see more scenarios that could have been potential opportunities to use this. And so that becomes an ethical question of, how are you planning for this? What is your focus on, and what is your goal? And is it working towards something? So with that being the case, since you build so much overt gear, how does that play out in how did your design, like, you're not the only plate carrier maker in the market, but what did you guys do? What was your need? What was the need that you saw that wasn't being met, that you could at least meet in to the level that you have so far?
Yeah. So kind of when we came on the market in 2020, um, there had been a really big push in the industry for minimalist plate carriers. There was Slicksters and LV119s and a lot of quality products coming out that were very minimalist in nature. And kind of our experience with those products as we were training and testing was that we just wanted a little bit more feature sets out of them. And so I would say that, like, versus being, a fully kitted out direct action plate carrier or a completely minimalist slick plate carrier, we kind of hit the middle of that with a medium feature set plate carrier, which offered just a few more conveniences, some admin pockets, some molly on the back, the ability to add rear panels or frag pouches. A lot of dudes will run like bang pouches off the back, that kind of stuff. And so it gave the ability to plus your kit up without it being like a cry ABS, like a full load bearing plate carrier. It kind of gave an intermediate option set, which is exactly what we wanted. We spent a lot of our time training with SWAT teams and in doing more of a SWAT mission set. That's what we train in. And so it's not carrying tons of gear for sustainment, but it's having key pieces of equipment on you and accessible as you need them. And so we were trying to build a plate carrier that kind of fit that intermediate mission set, maybe a little more law enforcement centric. But I think that same mission set fits the needs of a lot of civilians. It's a great, like, active shooter response type plate carrier that you keep in the trunk or the back of your truck, where it doesn't have days worth of sustainment gear. It doesn't have a whole bunch of flashbangs or frags in it, because that's just not realistically, that's not gear that's available to us. But it definitely has the ability to carry comms. It has the ability to run side plates. It has the ability, I definitely can run a banger or two if I need to. Mostly, obviously, I get to play with bangers in training, but I don't have bangers in real life. Um, just it's very modular. Like, that was a big importance to us too. Is one size does not fit all. Like, I'm a giant human being, and I think it's really important to make gear that's modular. It comes in a bunch of sizes, bunch of different plate carrier sizes, cummerbund sizes. You mix and match. So we were looking at kind of an intermediate mission set that could be plussed up more than the slick carriers that were really, really popular in like 2018, 2019, but not to the fullest extent of some of the really load bearing carriers that we've seen in the past. And I think we've hit that niche pretty well with our mission essential plate carrier. It's our standard plate carrier that we run. And I think it kind of gives that medium amount of feature sets without a ton of extra weight and cost associated to that, while still not being just a slick bare bones carrier. That was
Yeah.
what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can see the progression a little bit, in the sense of one of the main reasons why I at least in my timeline, and I wouldn't be surprised if I'm not alone in this one, is that the slicker, thinner, lighter plate carrier emphasis was the continuation of the process of how plate carriers started in 2000, and they were huge and bulky and just terrible. I mean, and there were different options, right? There were plate carriers in the 90s. You saw like the Black Hawk Down area, but like this whole like, and I think everyone who's been in the military, that anyone who was in the military who experienced like an IBA or whatever was like, what the hell is this? How am I supposed to do anything wearing this? And then, I had the opportunity, which the IBA was like at the time I was in, was like this ACU double flap vest thing that was sized to fit nobody but a 50-gallon drum, and like it was horrible. But I mean, it was a government contract and blah blah blah. Had all whatever. So that no one ever no. I mean that whatever. So like, and you had this going from I need to get thinner and thinner and thinner. Like you see it from special operations dudes who are like cutting zippers off of things, and you see guys who are like doing the minimalist thing, and like they're trying to reduce their weight in some ways because their mission requirements were making them carry so much stuff that they wanted to be fresh when they got to the target. Not my words. I think that was Cole Fackler who said that to me. I think that was the way he articulated it. And so like the point in this whole thing was like we a lot of us were chasing minimalist. But then I even look at my plate carrier that I'm using right now, and it's not minimal anymore. It's starting to get bigger again. As I'm adding, I got to add a PTT, and I got to add a this, and now I'm looking at better ways to do an admin pouch, and then I might want to add one, and now I got to add it. And so like, I get the minimalist thing; it has its place, but I think we're also moving away as gun culture is moving towards overt is more acceptable now, especially with 2020. It makes sense. It comes at a good time. So you've got
so.
you got admin pouches. You've got so it's a fully featured plate carrier, but it's not overbearing. I'd like to. I'll give them a look at sometime. How is that applied to the training scene? How have you seen the relevance between the gear and the because you've seen the gear thing go from minimalist to not so minimalist, and you said your gear is not focused towards just the special operator. It's kind of you're not everything is for their mission set. So how did that translate from gear and then into training?
It was pretty parallel for me, right? Like, so I just started training in 2018, but I started training as a part-time job. I put in since 2019, I put in an average of 20 hours a week in training. And so I spent lots and lots of hours on the range with a bunch of different instructors until like end of 2019, 2020. I started training, I wouldn't say exclusively, but I put a lot of my training hours in with Alliance, the Alliance Police Training Range in Alliance, Ohio. And I put a lot of my time and energy towards their CQB program, which then led me ultimately to be an assistant instructor with them, and then out on my own with defensive elements. And for the way we look at training, gear is very supplemental, right? Like a lot of our training is CQB focused, and I like that, not necessarily because CQB is some super high speed training, but because it's a three-dimensional training. How do you manage your weapon around a partner, around other people, around space? How do you navigate through that space? I think a lot of flat range training, a lot of Instagram training is very timer, hit the timer and do the Mozambique, do your bill drill and be fast. And obviously you have to know how to run your gun. That's a skill. You have to have that skill, right? But I think that skill, it kind of neglects what, like, any fight that any of us would ever be would have people there that we couldn't hurt. It would have obstacles there that we would have to navigate, right? Like, go ahead.
What were you doing before 2019 or 2018? What were you doing before you were training?
So,
it's not proved to me your qualifications. It's because in 2015 there was the timer became much more relevant because there was so much of a partition. Like if you taught somebody, there was this idea, the zeitgeist, I guess, this ghost in the machine of, it's not the right word. Fine, I'm just using botched philosophical phrases. Philosophy.
Just Will Smith quotes. I got it. That's all right.
Yeah. Well, I'm philosopher status revoked. Bah, meme page. But the point that I'm saying is, there was this stigma and prevalence in a lot of gun culture that at least that was pretty strong in 14, 15, 16, where the only thing that you could do that was beneficial for the beneficial for the citizen, which is kind of a scapegoat argument, was timer-based training. As soon as you started involving obstacles and other people, it very quickly was like it was looked at suspiciously, whether
It's
by
too
legal
tactical,
or by,
right?
it's either too tactical. It wasn't like it was LARPing. It was like it didn't quite have the LARPing stigma that's given on some things. It was just like we can't do that. There was this unwritten rule amongst all instructors that we couldn't teach CQB to civilians because we would all get sued by West Coast lawyers with big firms.
It's probably still true. I just don't care about that.
Well, I mean, I have no commentary. I don't. They're not. It's just rough. But I mean, I have no commentary on the lawyers thing. I think gun culture is just quite frankly winning. I think they're finding that. I think people are finding that when they hold set opinions, and they speak about them publicly, they find that people who know them stop liking them. That's kind
Nobody
of my.
likes me anyway.
Oh well.
Makes it
No, I
easy.
mean like. Well, I think we're seeing a continue. I think one of the successes in gun culture is that like the very very. There was an example that was put forward recently. It was like, a man tried to rob or assault a woman, and she ended up pulling out a handgun and shooting him once, and now his family is suing her, and like that dude's family should probably find a different country to live in because every single person who knows him probably doesn't like them anymore. I would imagine they're getting pretty gross side-eyed looks at the grocery store kind of thing. And that's such a change from it's like, "Oh, something happened, we're gonna ignore it," and then the lawyers are gonna fight it out. I think culturally speaking, like, I think, it's not easy to put together into words, but I think cultural it's not easy to put together into metrics, but I think culturally speaking, we're seeing as evidenced in gun culture where CQB training for anyone is now is the thing. And you are now the minority if you're absolutely unwilling to train civilians on principle.
Well, and I hope that's coming as a result of people realizing where real value in training comes from,
Hmm.
right? Like, I hope that's why CQB training is becoming more acceptable, right? Like, obviously, I'm as a heavy set individual, I get teased on the internet for LARPing on the regular, right?
Okay.
But the reality is no matter how in shape or out of shape I am, as a gun owner, it's my responsibility to know how to use that tool to the best of my ability. And I tend to believe that using that tool to the best of my ability is not taught at 15 yards on the flat range on a timer. I think that is a necessary skill that should then translate into my greater training journey. But the most important thing I can do as a gun owner is really learn how to manipulate my rifle, ready and carry positions. Where does the gun go, when, and why? Manipulate my rifle around other people, my handgun around other people, to be able to have the decision making skills to know which position and which situation environment dictates, right? um, to understand how to work around a partner that I can't be behind you with my gun up, right? That we need to be online to get in a fight together. All of these things are vastly more important in my skill and ability to actually fight with a weapon than how fast my splits are, how fast my bill drill is. Um, well, I also have to be fast. I also have to be accurate, right? It's not one
Hmm.
or the other. It's a combination of all of these skills. But I do think that even today, I don't think that most people who train put the time and energy into training the ready and carry positions, how to move around other people, working with a partner. I don't think people train that as much as they should. I think it gets glossed over, and I think realistically, a bunch of CQB training that people do is Instagram cool CQB training and not really super useful for them. And I'm not going to call out any instructors or any programs, but I've taken a lot of programs, and they do not all have equal value.
No, but for I imagine that within people who take courses, they exist in one of two groups. They either are looking forward to it, they would like to take some courses in the future, or they are in a position fiscally and where all other things being equal, fiscally and freedom of calendar or by occupation, say somebody like you, who get to travel, and you could go and take multiple courses in a year. So it seems like the Pareto distribution really has a big play here, where some people are either taking 10 courses a year or they're taking zero. There's
It's the
very
1% of the 1%, man.
yeah, and so like but yet that is something that we're trying to see. We're seeing a cross culture shift, right? So it was the 1% of the 1% who had the gear, and now that's not the case anymore. Now, I mean, okay, for example, I have dual tube night vision, right? If I had DT NVGs or dual tube night vision, if I had like a set of duals like PVS 15s 10 years ago, I would have been in like that really, really small 1%.
Right.
Now, that's not the case. Now it's still a small percentage of gun owners who own night vision, and there's a certain level of expectation being sort of this involved, perhaps this public, that I need to have it. Maybe I don't think that's really the right way of phrasing it, but it's also something that it's fun. It's not only fun, it's something I've used night vision for, it's 2023, like 14 years.
Well,
It's,
it's
and
certainly fun,
with a gap in the middle, but then
but it
so
adds
there's
a
a lot.
capability. Like, it's an additional capability to your toolbox.
But what I'm trying to say there is, like, within the training thing, we saw the gear thing kind of, the Pareto distribution level out a little bit, right? So we've seen the gear distribution level out a lot, especially with
Sure.
things that were uncommon 10 years ago.
A
Now
vastly
it's
higher percentage of gun owners today have body armor and plate carriers than they did 10 years ago. Vastly
vastly
higher.
large,
And
va-
that's
a, va-
fantastic. They
a
still don't know what to
vastly
do with it, but yeah.
it's a hard thing to say what knowing what to do with it means. I'm giving grace here. I have to.
Fair,
It's
fair.
on principle. It's like, on principle, it's not because of like derogatory. It's where I think of us in more of a frontier than in a game of catch up. That's how I think of it. I think of gun cultures on a frontier right now. We're trying to figure out social things like overt plate carriers and training CQB. Now that we've finally said, you know what, we've reformed this idea. It's done. We're not doing the segregation anymore. And there still are holders on, but fine.
I mean, we're almost in like the industrialization of the firearms era, right? Like, we're revitalizing what used to be. Like, our founding fathers carrying overt firearms was normal. It was every day. People every day had weapons of war on their person every day, all the time. And we're
Mhm.
renorming that. Obviously, we don't walk around Starbucks with our rifles. The people who do that, fucking hang yourself, right? But like, uh, we're renormalizing being people who are capable of violence. Being capable of violence is necessary. It's a necessary skill. We also have to be refrained enough to only use that when necessary, right? And so I am excited. I agree with you, right? Like, as a society, we're being more comfortable with people owning AR-15, semi-automatic military style weapons. We're more comfortable with people owning helmets, body armor, night vision. We're more
Mhm.
comfortable with people getting training than we ever have been in the modern era.
Mhm.
But realistically, we're just kind of getting back to the roots of our nation.
That is a really important detail of being able to articulate the roots of the nation. So maybe, like, how would you think of this? Is it, which one came first, the chicken or the egg? Which one's coming first? Which one's coming first? The desire for the population to have a reintegration in the values that we're founded on, or we want to have the stuff, right? There's a
Yeah,
criticism
I
of
mean,
like,
there's no
well,
clear answer to that, right?
there is no clear answer. Yeah. But it is I think it is an encouraging one, is they seem to both be rising at the same time. We're seeing, as
Doesn't
civilians and
matter, right? It
citizens,
almost doesn't matter what the answer is.
you're correct. I think you're correct on that one. You could I'm going to let it pass. I don't have an answer for it right now. So then with training, you said you work quite a bit with SWAT officers and the police environment. Um How have you seen the difference between what a SWAT officer would need as far as gear, or like a police officer on different levels would need as far as gear, as opposed to this sort of, let's just say, military industrial complex creep on the citizen?
Well,
Um,
so I mean, to be totally upfront, I don't have any exposure to military mission set. I
Okay.
don't have a military background. I do not train typically with ex-military. Sometimes train with ex-military guys, but not mostly. I'm training with law enforcement guys, and so I don't have a lot of exposure to that. That's your background. That's where you're from. That's a little foreign to me. I'm actually moving in that direction right now, realizing that in order for my training to be complete, I need to understand both sides of the house. I need to understand law enforcement and military. Um,
Hmm.
and so I'm moving more towards that, looking for some solutions to that with some friends, with some contacts that I have. The beauty of defense mechanisms is I get reached out to all the time by law enforcement agencies or by special operators to develop products with them specific to their needs. And that gives me opportunities to see their training, talk to them about their mission sets. So, realistically, I have a high level of exposure to a SWAT mission set as laid out by the SWAT team in Alliance, Ohio, that I train with all the time. But that is nearly the extent of my understanding. Is very based on that exposure with that particular group of men.
Okay, and so how have you like can you give me an example of a need, or maybe with I guess I'm trying to say, can you give me an example of a need that wasn't being met by the abundance of soft community gear, or that like, other than, well, I just needed a one off for this design that I have, right? Like, oh,
Yeah,
let's
breaching hammer.
Breaching hammer. Okay. Yeah.
So
I'll tell you my experience in the soft community is we didn't have an idea how to carry that damn thing.
right, I got
We
it
did,
solved.
we didn't use it much either. I mean, we did occasionally while I was in, but it was definitely not the ideal weapon or tool. So at the
And that's
time, I'm sorry, it was not
exactly,
the
yeah.
favored one. So you found a
Well,
better way to carry it.
so when we started training with the Alliance SWAT team, right? And we took breaching class with them for the first time. They were using what seems to be an industry standard solution. It's a piece of PVC and a Cordura sleeve that can molly onto a plate carrier or cummerbund. Um, the problem with that is 90% of guys were putting the breaching hammer on their back. And what I would see guys do is they would, in order to access the breaching hammer, we put our rifle in rear sling. So you put your rifle in rear sling, you pull the breaching hammer out of this tube, you use it to set the pry, or you use it as a makeshift ram, depending on where you are, what you're doing, and then you drop it back in the tube. And a half dozen times, I watch guys drop it back in the tube and have that 20-pound hammer slam down on their optic when their rifle was in rear
Oh,
sling.
yeah.
Not awesome, right? I've heard stories. I haven't witnessed it myself, but I've heard stories of optics being sheared off their mounts by dropping a breaching hammer into the tube and having it smash into the optic. And so it became very clear for me that one, carrying it on their back was a cumbersome, uncomfortable way to do it. It required a lanyard because it was a high center of gravity. So if they would bend over, the tool would start to move out, and they would need a lanyard to secure it. That lanyard then didn't play nice with slings. Sling lanyard interplay would be tangled, and it would be a mess. Then obviously the issues of breaking optics, shearing optics off mounts. And so I thought about it for a little while. We went to a class or two with the head breaching as a focus, and I developed a scuba webbing carpenter loop, right? Like, I wouldn't say I invented anything. I made a carpenter
Hmm.
loop out of scuba webbing that you could strap to your belt. And now the entire SWAT team in Alliance, Ohio, a number of other teams are carrying all their breaching hammers on a loop on their belt, which puts the weight down on their belt, low center of gravity. So bending over doesn't lead to the tool wanting to fall out, no longer requires a lanyard because it's not trying to jettison itself regularly. It's below all of your kit. So when you put it in a loop and drop it, it's not smashing into anything. It's not breaking your optics. It's not tangling with your slings, right? It almost seems like the stupidest thing ever. Like, I made a carpenter loop, right? Like how smart you got to be to make a carpenter loop? People have been carrying hammers and carpenter loops forever. But the reality is it makes carrying that tool way easier for these guys. And now I have a number of SWAT operators who use that solution. It costs $25 or $30. It's cheap, no big deal, easy to make. But it vastly improves quality of life for guys who have to carry hammers, and it works just as good for pry. Collapsible tools like double tap and Bushido are what we built it around. But again, and those tools are more SWAT specific tools. A lot of guys carry halogens. It's not the right answer for a big huli bar. But for those collapsible tools, it works really good. And for the teams that use that, it has made carrying them way, way easier. And so that's just one example of us being involved in training, seeing the frustrations with a particular, piece of gear or, capability, and trying to figure out how a better way to solve that.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were starting to go through the description, I was like, well, why don't you just carry it like a sword? Like have like a on your hip, because like
A
people
hundred
ran
percent.
around people ran around with swords for a long time. Sure, you had to like, tip the piece up to sit down or what. I was also a kid and I had one when I was a kid. It's not like I don't have one now, but I was just thinking like, oh, that would have made, and then of course carpenter loops. Yes, yes, absolutely. So okay, cool. It's good to
It's a damn
hear.
carpenter loop, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, see, and that's the thing though, is like it's always really neat to see somebody go, I figured it. I figured something else out that's a little bit better. Like you didn't have to sell me on it. I'm not breaching. My breaching, I'll tell you, my breaching experience is in order of most used: shotgun,
Ram,
demo,
shotgun,
hammer.
hooligan. Right? Yeah.
Shotgun, demo, hammer. That's what it was. Those were the three that I used the most.
You guys
Shotgun
didn't
the
ram?
most. I mean, mechanical. Anything mechanical
Yeah.
would have been. We didn't carry a ram for sure because it's way too much weight. Are you gonna hump a ram all the way up and over a mountain on a 4-click infill?
And that's
Not a.
exactly the difference of mission set, right? Law enforcement carries
Mhm.
ram because they're parking the car in front of the hit house. They're walking 20 yards over, hitting the house, dropping the ram at the front door, and going in, right?
Yeah, and so it is a
Mission
different
dictates
mission
gear.
set.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, and so mission dictating gear for the needs of the military is probably the most defined because they've had to, in an ideal world where we don't have bureaucrats, they would have had to undergo a long process of target identification, specifics of the mission, objectives of the operation, all of this kind of stuff. Come to find out, it's not always the case, but oh well. When it comes to law enforcement, I imagine that if we were going to build a spectrum with the average citizen on one end and the military on the other end, most people would put law enforcement somewhere in the middle. But I don't know if that's accurate. Would you see that? This is spontaneous, but would you think of it that way?
So it's a difficult question to answer. Um, so I'll give you some factual things that I know versus trying to give
Hmm.
you an opinion on this.
Hmm.
Some factual things that I know. I train 2,000 hours a year in CQB. SWAT
Nice.
officers, SWAT officers in Alliance, Ohio, train 100 hours a year in CQB,
Which is probably about 10 times more than the average cop.
which is at least 10 times more than the average cop. And so I don't want to speak disparaging of these guys, because the reality is they are absolutely performing up to the level of training that they've been given.
Which is a long-term conversation. This is where
It's a
we could very quickly get political about this. Is like why is it when there's a defund the police element because we're having issues with, say, how the police is interacting with the populace? It's
right.
never getting rid of the problems in the agency. It's always getting rid of the last vestiges of something useful.
We say these police are not trained enough. We should stop giving them money. And those two things are absolutely counterintuitive. If we want law enforcement to make the best decisions with guns in their hand, we have to give them lots more training. Lots more training.
Mhm.
But that's not where we're currently headed in our political climate. And I don't know if you want to turn this into a political conversation or not. And my intent here is not to be disparaging to police officers, but they just don't have enough training to do the job that they're thrust into.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we will, because guns. Well, this is as Tim Pool says, because politics is pop culture. Everything is gun. Everything is political, and so and since guns are necessarily or at this point in time a very political subject, yeah, I'm open to a conversation about it. Absolutely, it's I'm open to conversation about it. The challenge that I run into any of the politics talk about guns is that it just tends to go into it just goes nowhere. Like, oh,
It's circular, right? Yeah.
or it's just black pill. It's just raw, raw. Like it's either all everything is amazing or everything is trash. And so like, and
I
I was
like it
thinking
raw.
about, hey, You know, so you are a connoisseur of the sushi. Um, but the the point being said is, um, that's why I like I will talk politics when it comes to guns, but it's always like, what are we aiming at? How are we framing it? How is this useful? As opposed to, look, we're winning because North Dakota is becoming a constitutional carry state, or look, we're losing because the braces are going away, or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think as politics pertains to law enforcement is a slightly different. It's a slightly different conversation, right? Than our gun rights as individual citizens. Um, as someone who trains 2,000 hours a year, that's equivalent to a 20-hour a week job. Um, so I train for a part-time job. I feel inadequately prepared to have to regularly intervene in violent situations, right? I would feel
Yes.
inadequately prepared for that with 20 hours a week on average of training.
Okay.
So I can only say that the answer to having officers be more prepared to make good decisions in the middle of violent encounters is that we give them more training. More training is going to come with a high dollar cost. Training is not cheap. And it's even if it's just the cost of the hours, right? 2,000 hours is half a work year.
Mhm.
Half an officer's wage then would have to be reinvested just in the time to pay them in training them. And again, I train 2,000 hours and do not feel I do not want to get in a gunfight tomorrow. I am not
Mhm.
interested in that. I hope that does not happen, right? And we're giving these guys 100. This is SWAT, right? 100 hours of training and telling them that they are as equipped as they could ever be. Go go into every violent situation and do the right thing. And it's not their fault that they don't do the right thing. It's not their fault that they're not equipped to make on the fly in the middle of heat of the moment decisions. Decision making under stress is very difficult and must absolutely be trained over and over under reps. You will not make the right decision under stress if it's the first time you've done it. It will not happen.
Yes, this applies to the citizen as well. You will not make the right
100%.
decision. Well, it's not that you will not. It's just that the reality of it is
The
you
odds are
probably
lower,
won't.
right?
That's
The
not.
odds are
It's
lower.
yeah. It's a combination of odds not being in your favor and something else. And the way I'm trying to think of it is, it's like, it's just there's the gosh darn. How am I trying to put this together? I cannot imagine. You think about no, I can. You think about a person who's trained, who's a citizen, someone like us, and we get into a situation where you are suddenly being faced with the law, death, prison, all of these factors, your family being and all of your family being harmed, your family being harmed afterwards because of backlash, all of this stuff, right? Yeah, and yeah, it's the reality of the situation. We want to alleviate the problem. So what I want to do is, in the next part of this conversation, I want to be able to understand better what it's like being one step closer to law enforcement. Because politically speaking, people want to defund the police, which means nothing, or they want to fund the police, which means nothing, because either one ends up, you get more diversity training and less realistic training.
Right.
Well, who chooses what training to get? Who chooses where that money goes? Because I'm not going to give you money if I don't know where it's going.
Not the people who make the right choice.
Yeah, well, how do we change that? There you go. That's an element of that's an because we're the more accurate we can get, the better we can be at addressing the problem. So from where law enforcement is standing, of course they want more training. Generally speaking, I would think so. Then there are programs like Archway Defense, which will basically provide training. There are companies like yours that provide training in different ways, right? There are companies that provide training for law enforcement. And what is their hang up? Why, if there's definitely enough instructors out there who would teach this stuff,
Yeah.
where's the supply line failure?
So again, I want to be careful talking disparagingly about law enforcement officers. I have a lot of friends who are cops.
Hmm.
I owe a lot to my mentor, who's SWAT commander, right, at Alliance. Um, I'll use again facts. I will just speak facts here. At Alliance, They reserve, I believe, 2 spots in every single class for any law enforcement officer to take, that's from the Alliance PD or local jurisdictions, right? 2 spots in every class that's hosted there. Those are carbine classes on the flat range, that's CQB, that's advanced CQB night. Every single class, there's 2 spots reserved. Most of the time, those 2 spots are not taken. This is free training for local law enforcement who will be paid their hours to go there and train on the clock. And most of the time, these hours are not used.
Yes.
And so I
Okay.
don't, I believe there's a training problem in law enforcement. I do not think it is exclusively an admin problem. I do not think it
Okay.
is exclusively that training is not available. Now,
Okay.
I also think that most agencies are not offered the training that Alliance is offered. They have an amazing facility and they have an incredible lead instructor who runs their range. And I do not think that most agencies have these resources available. But even at an agency that does, officers do not take advantage of it. When I do see officers in class, it's the same 3 to 5 guys. Out of the entire department, the entire SWAT team, I see the same 3 to 5 guys at classes. And again, I'm there every other week for 20 hours or for 40 hours for to average 20 hours a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I again, I don't want to speak disparagingly about these guys. I think they're doing the best they know how to do. There's some sort of disconnect between where they are and where they need to be. There's some sort of disconnect, and I don't know how to speak to that. I don't know what the answer is for that, but I see these spots remain unused when they would get paid the hours, they'd get the ammo given to them, and the spots are free.
Okay, so let's kind of pick apart some issues, right? So there are going to be let's say let me put this. Well, we can refuse the bad outliers if they can be counted as bad outliers. And one of them is some of the people in the force don't have the ethical fiber to see the value in training necessary to their job. You saw this, and I'm using this reference, is in every part of everybody in Ranger Battalion, of all the people in Ranger Battalion, there were certain people who did not think it was important enough to learn how to do their job.
Not everybody wants to be all you can be, right?
There's and it doesn't, it's not what percentage of it changed in the opinion of what was the scaling measurement and who was the person in charge, and so ultimately I think ultimately, especially in law enforcement, as diverse and broad as it is, a lot of that comes down to the individual, and that same weight of ethical weight lands on the hands of every civilian or citizen who chooses to be a human being and chooses to take
Nobody gets to
responsibility for
choose
the
to
life.
be a human being, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, chooses to live, exercise their human rights and take responsibility for their immediate surroundings. And what I'm trying to say is, it's not exclusively a law enforcement problem, but there is going to be a certain percentage. We're not sure what, and maybe we don't have the tools at hand to determine that. But some of them will just be like, "I'm good. It's not my problem. I don't need to."
I took my 12-hour CCW class. I bought my Taurus, whatever 9mm pistol. I'm good. I will solve all problems that face me. Everything will be fine. I have a gun and I'm awesome.
Yep. So
and we see
know
that mindset.
You do. You see that mindset. We do. We certainly do. But it's by far not nearly as prevalent as I thought it was at one point in time. And so or even so, it's like, okay, we're not gonna focus on that because that's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's the same conversation though. I think, if we're talking about law enforcement not taking when training is an opportunity and they don't take it, I think the same is true of citizens. I mean, I don't believe that more than 2% of armed citizens receive training. It's probably less than that. Right?
Probably less. Yes.
Beyond a CCW permit. So we're talking 1%. And again, the 1% of the 1%. What percentage of those who seek training take more than one class a year?
Okay, I think it's more than 1% who I will disagree with it. I think it's more than 1% who are actively pursuing training. There
I
are
see the same guys in every class. And I go to different trainers at different parts of the country, and I see the same guys that I saw in Ohio. I see them in Indiana. I see them like, I see the same guys everywhere I go.
Yes, but you're talking about the 1% of the 1%. Like you are talking about the small. It's not a cadre. It's a cohort, something, whatever. But there are people.
I mean, it's the Pareto distribution that you're talking about for sure.
Yeah, but so like there are people who are trying to figure it out themselves. Whether or not they will or they won't is not. Maybe that's the ethical question that we're facing today is can you? And in some answers, the question is you kind of have to or you will. And
no, if we change this conversation and it wasn't about guns anymore and it was about medical, would we say, hey, go figure out on your own how to apply life-saving medical, how to apply a tourniquet, how to put on a chest seal, how to use an Israeli battle dressing to stop an immediate bleed, right? We would say, go figure that out on your own. We would absolutely say that's bullshit.
I agree with your point.
You absolutely need to go to a professional, right? And so now that we're going to say, hey, it's not saving people, it's killing people. Go ahead and figure killing people out on your own. That's asinine.
I will agree with your argument there. I will. What I'm trying to phrase that, or where I'm disagreeing with you, is that people are learning through people that they know who are trained. That they may not be training, but they're doing stuff together. It's not going to be the same. You have people who are taking courses, or they're learning as best as they can from maybe online instructors, because not everyone can afford whatever the bill is, which the problem with the money thing is that like I have no solution for that.
So I'll offer a solution to that. Mm-hmm. If you want to train with defensive elements and money is the reason that you can't, send me an email and we'll figure it out.
Okay. There you go. There's an offer on the table. So you have no excuse not to get training. Right. And so now we're describing that let's go back to this officer paradigm of some of them just don't want to do it. They're lazy. Okay, fine. We don't know how many. Some aren't, whatever. Then I'm sure you have disheartened ones, or people trying to, because like, how long is the course?
On their way out, right? They're on their way out.
They're on their way out. They've already, quit, or they're not accurately yet assessing the level of imminence, the level of what's the word, like it's the George Floyd scenario. If you know what I mean, like I'm willing to bet that Chauvin was not aware of the political ramifications of his actions until probably the next day, and it hit him like a brick shithouse. Right. And so maybe that could have been a training thing, and maybe that could have been an ethics thing, and maybe he was a bad dude, or maybe he was a good dude. It doesn't matter.
The reality, though, in that case, is he absolutely to a T executed the training he was given.
Exactly. So now you've got conflicting training.
How do we hold him accountable for doing exactly what his admin told him to do? How is his admin not in jail right now? Why is he in jail? He did exactly what he was trained to do.
Because that's what admin does. The role of admin is
that's what admin does. 100%. 100%.
But I mean, and so what we're trying to do, culturally speaking, is we're trying to undo. We're trying not to undo. We are fighting against. How do I say this? I've said that so many times. It's the same problem with the VA. Right? The VA is a great idea, right? It's this great idea. We had these people go fight for the country. They're going to come home. We're going to take care of their mental and physical needs, medical needs. You know what the VA is? The VA is communist fucking Russia.
Brother,
it is.
Every single good idea our government has gets executed just as shitty as the VA.
You could. I don't want to completely throw it all out. Like, it has to be a solving problem. But the issue that you're running into in the administrative problem is it just becomes a game of passing the buck, right? No one's going to, and so that can very quickly become a black pill approach. And that's where I'm like, man, I understand being disheartened. And this is kind of where when I think of like the whole black pilled thing, right? The whole not admin, but like how administrations and bureaucracies become these bloated creatures where it's just about blame shifting and whatever.
It's all political.
It's all political, but we go back to the quote by Yuri Bezmenov, which was that, Russian defector guy. Who knows how true it really was, but whether or not he was a legitimate, like, Spetsnaz, what did he say? Whatever he was, whether or not he was who he says he was or not, what he ended up describing was this idea of disheartenment, or like getting people disheartened and discouraged, and so that they no longer concerned themselves with what was real, and then you could convince them of anything. The thing about that I have the argument against is that has worked for people to go, I am not going to be discouraged, and I'm not going to be crushed by the bureaucracy. And so then some people can figure out to find solutions, and some people can, maybe it's in their home, and maybe it's in their community, and maybe it's in their law enforcement agency, maybe it's within their culture, maybe it's within their neighborhood, whatever it is that as we are continuously able to observe the problems with bureaucratic bloat, we're not completely crushed by it, and we can figure out how to make these solutions. And sometimes they're long tail solutions, and they have to take time. So for that in law enforcement, some people just need to go take classes. That's what I'm hearing from you. What are some other hurdles that get in the way?
In the way of getting training?
Getting training. Like, is it, what kind of training should I get? I only have so much time in the day. Who's in charge of
I mean, I
choosing?
definitely think that people deal with, paralysis by analysis, right? Like trying to figure out who to train with is difficult, because bad training is not better than no training, right? Bad training is in fact worse than no training. So that's also tricky, right? So I'll say go train with Alliance police training, and if you like what they do, I do the same thing. But so deciding who to train with is difficult, right? Like it is hard. I don't want people to go train with the local guy who does a bunch of run and gun carbine stuff, that at the end of the day he's teaching them to flick their safety off as soon as the stock touches their shoulder, because that's faster. Like, man, I don't care about faster. I care about right. I want to shoot the right person in the right place at the right time. I do not want to shoot the wrong person because I turned my safety off because my stock touched my fucking shoulder, right? But it's hard. Like, you realistically have to train a bunch before you even know what the right training is. I trained the wrong training for a year, right? And I haven't been training a long time. I've just been training a lot. Right? Like, I haven't trained for years. I've just trained for lots of hours. But it took me a year of I wouldn't say the wrong training, like they were terrible, but it wasn't the best training, right? A year of not the best, to then start finding what the best meant, what the best was. And so to some extent, you kind of just have to get started. And then you have to use some critical thinking to decide, like, are the things I'm being taught valid? Are they useful? Are they correct? Are they moral?
How did you see yourself, looking back at yourself in the last 4 years? How have you seen yourself come to the conclusion that you needed to make a change, decide, solve that problem, or solve that change, and then move forward? How did you see yourself grow, and how much of it was a result of the training itself, and how much of it was a result of, I've been doing this for 3 years, now I'm mature enough to make the decision in this way?
There's a level of both, right? So when I started training in 2018, so in 2019 I started training at the 1,000 hours a year. In 2018 it was like 400 or 500 hours, right? I trained half as much as I am now, like once a month. And so in 2018 I trained local, and for almost the whole year I took classes locally, and they were good. I was learning things. It was bettering the skills that I had. I was getting better, more accurate on the pistol. I was getting skills on the rifle, right? It was making me better in every way. At the end of 2018, I stopped training with local instructors and started training with national instructors. I started training with Steve Fisher from Sentinel Concepts. I started training with Will Petty from Centrifuge Training. And what I could immediately tell is these national instructors had more refined and higher expectations, right? They demanded more of me, which made me better faster. And so it's not that the local guy was teaching me garbage. It's that the local guy was letting me get away with bad habits that the national guys didn't let me get away with, right? That the national guys taught me a couple things the local guys didn't teach me. And then my progression from in 2018 2019 is I started training a lot at Alliance Police Training. I took one Sentinel Concepts class at Alliance Police Training in 2018, which then led me down the rabbit hole of lots and lots of Alliance Police Training classes in 19. And what I can say is Alliance Police Training is different. And in the industry, it has a bad reputation for being different. But for those who train there, this is the tricky part. In the industry, it's bad to train at Alliance. You know, most instructors would say, "Oh, Tim doesn't know shit because he just trains at Alliance." The problem is I've trained with them too, and I don't think what they're doing is better.
Okay.
They do, but they don't understand both. And I understand both, and I believe what Alliance teaches is better. And they just think Alliance is worse because it's not what they teach. And so it's this very complicated, right? That's complicated. Like how, like we will never all be on the same page.
Yeah, well, and I would never want to take a class from you if you didn't think you were teaching the best thing that you could. That's a huge element of it, right? If I thought you were
something,
but keep going.
Yeah, well, something we say like literally at every class is if you can show me a better way to do the thing I'm teaching you, I will do it that way tomorrow, right? If you can show me and prove to me through data that there's a better way to do this, I will do it that way tomorrow. I have no institutional loyalty to my tactics. Zero. If they're not the right tactics, fuck them. Give me the right tactics. I don't want the wrong tactics. I want the right tactics. I have no loyalty, no history. I will give it up tomorrow. But the data has to be there. It can't just be your good idea fairy shit, right? It has to be proven by data.
Okay. So this is a question that comes up in philosophy quite a bit.
Ooh.
This is a distinction that comes up in philosophy quite a bit, and it's that is-ought distinction. Is that you can show me the data, and there's a way that this is extremely personal to us. You can show me the data that shows a frequency of a certain thing, but that data will never jump the bridge, the gap to telling me that it's right or wrong.
Sure. You're talking about confirmation bias?
No, I'm talking about the is-ought distinction, David Hume.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
And then, well, it's more germane to the subjects that I'm reading about. And so this is kind of what I like it. And so an example of this, though, that's very personal to us is you could show me every statistic in the world that told me that a country that owns guns is more likely to encounter the death by people being killed with guns immorally, right? You can tell me that the number of a country that owns guns will have X amount of more murders with guns than a country that doesn't have them freely available to the citizens, right?
But murders by guns isn't the point.
I'm stating you a statistic, a data set piece, right?
This is what people use who don't like guns, right? They say, well, there's a lot more gun deaths in countries that allow guns, but violent crime is actually the measurement here, which is I think what you're going to say. So I'll just shut up. Yeah.
No, what I'm going to say is it doesn't matter to me. I'm saying that the act of being a slave is not better for me than it is not better for me to be in a in a state. I am immoral. It is an immoral state for a country to treat its population like serfs that do not have rights to infringe on their existence. There's no way that you can argue to me a stats-based argument that's going to overcome a rights-based argument, saying
the unique thing here, though, is both of them are true. You are 100% correct that this is rights-based. But if we look at the stats correctly, if we look at the stats honestly, they also support that violent crime is lower, right? And so, like, it's only a manipulation of those statistics that would speak against the natural right. When we're honest about the statistics, right? Obviously, in nations with no guns, gun violence is lower. Well, of course it is. There's no guns. But violent crime is not, in fact, lower. And that's what actually matters, right? Murder is not lower. Like, just because you cut me up with a machete isn't better than getting shot with a pistol, right? Just because you set me on fire is not somehow better. I would, in fact, say it's worse than getting shot in the face with a pistol. And so, like, in America, we have murders translated into gun deaths. And so we're like, oh, no, there's gun deaths. In Australia, they just burn people alive and they say, look, no gun deaths. We solved it. Well,
Yeah,
I would
but
much
I
rather
mean,
be shot in the face than burned alive, my friend.
or you have the perpetual meme of like, this is what it's like to be welcomed in London, and it's just a dude getting shanked a bunch. I mean, I know it's a joke, okay? I've been to
But
London,
also,
I've been to London. I mean, there was that one guy with the narwhal horn. That guy should have been made a hero because that was hilarious. If anyone knows what I'm talking about. But my point being said is that like the statistical argument that it causes, or that the statistical argument that by this produces this outcome is not the same thing as me making a moral evaluation of it. And me making a
sure,
moral evaluation of it is, though true, still immoral. And
yeah,
therefore, it is
your
not
stats don't
within
trump my freedom.
your stats. It's you cannot argue a statistical, you cannot effectively levy a statistical arguments against a moral rights-based argument. They do not match. Because the argument being, well, how many people need to die before your rights are irrelevant? And the answer is every single one of them. If there
But
are
see, it's not required, because if we really look at this, the stats and our rights support each other.
yes,
It it
the
it
statistics, it
always
is.
does. You are
Yes.
correct. If one was vastly outweighing the other, we would want to go with rights over stats. But in reality, the stats support the right to defend yourself.
Yes, and like, even and this is why I'm saying, I definitely agree. Like, the longevity of human existence is an argument in favor of what we're saying, right? Like the fact that, like, dude, weapons have been around forever. We're not just dead all of a sudden. But and then you can point out it's been the cultural issues and the social issues and the way things that countries believe in
Maybe if
homogenous.
kids had dads, that'd be better.
Kid, it's fathers in the homes is like, let's take the Japanese question. Like, was it 99% of people in Japan are ethnically and culturally Japanese? So like, there is this homogeneity that has a certain effect. Maybe we don't want that. America is never going to achieve that level of America.
All the Norwegian countries that our socialists lean on as the epitome of how socialism works, every single one of those countries are 99% homogenous.
I also think that they would argue against that, saying that they're a socialized country. I think they would. I think many of them would have.
Those countries would argue against it, but our socialists think they are. They're
Yeah,
they
yeah,
are
but
they are free market countries with higher social programs,
yes,
still
and they
paid
have a
by a
small.
lower net tax than we pay
Yep, and they
because
have
our
a
government's
smaller
corrupt and
population.
bullshit, right? Yeah,
Yep,
and it's
exactly.
homogenous.
Yep,
We're
and
on
they
the
have a
same page here, brother.
oh, right on the same doorstep, man. It's like, but what we're going to have to look at as Americans, and this is where gun culture comes back into America, is that you know gun culture is Americana. There is something about this country that is built into our core beliefs where this is not going away.
We're
It's not going.
the only country ever who guarantees you the right to defend yourself against your government. That is fundamental and absolutely better not go away.
Yeah, at least in the 21st century. At least in the 20, like, I can't say for all,
Modern era, right?
but we are one of the first, if not only, countries who have codified it into our founding documents and survived for this long to say it is not the Constitution is to limit government. It is putting limitations on government, and one of those limitations is that the government is not allowed to treat you like a serf by disarming you.
They just don't follow those rules no more.
Yeah, well, you can't expect illiterate people to follow a book, so I'm sorry.
Brother. What do we got 3 years left in our 250 years is the average lifespan of a civilization. We got like 3 years left.
I mean, that is confirmation bias 101. It's always been this way. It will always be this way, okay? Empires rise and fall in periods of 300 years, but we have no way of knowing. We have no way of figuring out if this is the death of the republic and the rise of the new
No, but
empire.
the sniff test, it says something's happening.
It does. Yeah, I mean, are you currently in Ohio?
I
How's
am,
the sniff?
dude, and
How's the sniff test going over
the water's
there?
a little oily, man. The water's a little oily.
How's the sniff test going over there? We're dying.
I
That's
was a little
terrible.
nervous about the clear coat on my truck this morning after the rain. Seems
Oh,
all right.
geez, dude. So you're in direct impact of the
I'm 30
chemical.
miles from East Palestine. Yeah.
Oh, so from a guy who's there, by the time this goes online, by the time this airs, it's probably going to be in America's news cycle, old news. But like, how are you folks doing? Like, what's the word on the ground? Just
Nothing. There's zero impact. I have
okay,
noticed nothing. I have felt nothing. The water tastes fine. The fucking air is fine. The rain is not melting my truck. Clear coat. It's fine. It's all fine.
okay. So that would be, because this is going to
I
be
have not gone
political.
out and looked into the rivers and stirred them up to
Mhm.
see if they have like I haven't done that. I'm not here for that, right? But
Okay, yeah, because I mean, it becomes a little bit of like a not a zeitgeist, a little bit of a monomania, but it not monomania. I gotta find the right word again. There it is, one per episode. But the point being said is right now, there's a lot of attention on Ohio. And just but there was a lot of attention on Minneapolis when I lived there. And that
you live there
attention,
2020?
oh yeah,
Oh
I
man, we
was
should have
there.
known each other then. I'm like 2 hours from there.
Oh
Normally,
shoot.
not right now, but normally.
Not no okay, yeah, no, I was in Minneapolis in 2020, and it was kind of like the nation discovered that we were a state. You gonna make it
Yeah,
over
we
there?
don't. Minnesota doesn't matter most of the time.
Yeah, so the nation discovered that we were a state, and then we were on everyone's radar, and then like by 2021, we just kind of disappeared.
You know what? I think the government kind of just runs the story they want to run with, right?
But I mean, of
Recently,
course.
the last few years, some guy sneezing near you, fucking deadly. But today, giant chemical spill in Ohio, totally fucking safe. No big
Yep,
fucking deal. It's all fine.
it's all fine.
So I
It's
mean,
all
who
fine.
who
Yeah,
knows, man? I totally trust them. Whatever they say, I listen to them.
yeah,
Hear that,
yeah. I
FBI?
mean,
Hear that, FBI?
uh,
I totally trust and listen to everything you guys say. I
uh,
definitely do not think that you are the enemy of fucking freedom. You are the best.
have you
Love you.
have you nicknamed your FBI agent yet?
Well, I've met her.
Oh, you're not married to her, are you?
No.
Oh, good.
Oh, I had
I
an
was a
interview
little.
with the FBI a couple years ago where I told them some
Whew.
interesting things that I cannot say on camera.
Well, then don't say them on camera. We're gonna segue then because I want to protect the what's left of what's going on. But yeah, so the training thing, like
But fuck you,
let's.
Karen.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Karen. Um, no, geez, you're this is funny. So, but I need to focus still on the training thing because
Yeah,
how would
training's
you
the best.
then? So like no, but here's then one like like what would be some training? What would you as you as an instructor? What could you use more of? Where are you gaining information? How do you gather more, and how does that help? Like
Sure.
what is something that's because culture is industry and industry grows, and like what are things that you find and you're like, oh man, I could use more of this.
So for me, I believe that I cannot say that I am ready to teach if I am not constantly a student, right? So I am constantly a student.
Hmm.
I literally I'm in Ohio now because last Saturday and Sunday I took force on force. There's a CQB class that was force on force. And so what it was is it wasn't any instruction, it was completely testing all the skills that we've been taught, Alliance Police Training. They have this 1,000,000 square foot building in Canton, Ohio. It's amazing. It's this old building from the 1800s, and you just do CQB in it, and you get shot in the face by bad guys all the time. And so for me, that is how I improve as an instructor. Because I teach that program, I train in that program. I train deeper and deeper and deeper into that program to the point where my learning objectives are, today I need to learn deep cross cover, and once I learn deep cross cover, then I need to learn, how to the best place to deal with suspect control. Right? Hey, man, why are you dealing with suspect control out in the middle of all these angles of exposure? Why don't you back up 20 feet to where you control the space and do suspect control there? Right? And so that was my big lesson this weekend: is where should I be doing suspect control? And force on force is one of the only classes you get to actually do live suspect control, right? Most of the time you're talking to
Hmm.
paper, and paper targets are like all they can do is comply because they can't actually physically move, right? They can just comply or not, I guess. But
Yeah, well, the paper target is the binary, whereas the real world is much more because I had a friend describe it once as conservatives think of violence as an on-off switch, and liberals think of violence as a continuum where like it blurs the lines where a thing is and isn't. And so you think of like, oh, you're a gun owner, and how do we teach how is it how at the time, or how is concealed carry taught so much? It's either legal or you're going to prison. It's either a justified shoot or you're going to prison. It's either legal or don't ever do it. And you're like, okay,
Right.
but
Yeah, the
encounters,
world lives in the gray, man. It's all gray.
well, it's not just that it's not gray. I don't know if I would agree with it being gray. It's that that is not a sufficient data set of, or that is not a sufficient toolbox to
Right.
really approach the real world. It's black and white in the sense of you shouldn't have shot him, but it's definitely like the things that make it muddy are,
It's black and
well,
white after the fact. It's
you could
never black
what
and white in the moment.
okay. I mean, I would disagree that it's never. I would say that
You're right. Never is not the correct word. But the again, we're talking about likelihoods, right? Like to say that like in the moment, the wrong call gets made in the moment, but it's way harder in the moment to tell if it's the right call or the wrong call. Whereas after the fact, it's vastly easier.
yes, but while you're in the moment, it still doesn't change the fact that you should have, or it doesn't mean you could have or you should have. Another example of the black and white is that you only learned how to pull the trigger, right? This is a hypothetical, and so it's going to be a little bit hyperbolic, but you only learned how to pull the trigger, and so you approached everything by shooting it, as opposed to, you are in shape so you're comfortable detaining a guy. I'm not saying comfortable as in like packing your suitcase is comfortable. I'm like, I know that I can choose between the gun and the knife. I can choose between the gun and the handcuffs. I can choose between the rifle and the
Right.
pistol. And because when you're in that high stress scenario, I don't want to extend the stress of the high stress scenario by going, well, I shouldn't use that tool. I should only use this. I'm only going to use this tool because this is the only one I'm comfortable with.
Correct. If the gun is the
So
only tool you have, you will make a lot of bad decisions.
yes, and so in some ways, maybe the binary of violence on, well, I'll make a political argument. The binary on the right when it comes to American politics and violence is it's either justified or it's not justified. The binary on the left is it's either good for us or it's not good for the cause. And that's very classic examples of like
And
it's not
it lives somewhere between both of those things.
whereas when we look at the actual application of violence, it definitely has not gray areas but escalation. So then you see people teaching escalation of force and then de-escalation of force. And that is, I think, a good place where training goes. But that, how do you do that without force on force training? I don't know. And even then it's still a little muddy
Yeah,
because
well,
he's an
force on force
actor.
is the best, right? Force on force is the best and most realistic training you can get. But at some
Hmm.
point, there's still artificialities to that.
Yes. So are you seeing, and this is something that I didn't look up, are you seeing more force on force training being made available to the average citizen or to the American citizen?
They're not taking it.
They're not
Um,
taking it. Okay.
we have to cancel a force on force class every year because we can't
Okay.
fill it. They won't
Okay.
take it. And that the class that we typically have to cancel is our CCW force on force. So
Oh,
it puts you into bank robberies and spousal abductions and motor vehicle fucking carjackings, right? Like it puts you into real CCW scenarios, and we can't fill that class twice a year. Once a year, no problem. Twice a year, we can't do it.
okay.
And realistically, that class shows you exactly where in your CCW training, in your everyday I carry a gun motherfucker training, that you need to have improvements, where you need to work. And people don't want that test. They don't want to know the answer to that question. They
I
want to feel
I
like I bought the gun, I'm good to go, leave me alone. And
it
we
can
we
it can
we challenge on verbals, we challenge on 911 skills, and they don't want it.
it can be very humbling. I agree. I agree in the sense of I'm gonna disagree with you. Actually, I don't like. I don't, and I'm gonna disagree a little bit on flavor. Same medicine, different flavor.
Take the cherry, please.
Okay. I mean, I prefer a cherry vanilla, maybe even a Cavendish. But um, so there is going to be an element of people who don't want to be humbled. It's the same thing that we we're talking about with the issue of the officers. Some officers don't want to take their job seriously. Some people can't afford it. Okay, take those two groups of people out. What's
Just
left?
call
People
me.
who,
Just call me if you
pe-
can't afford it.
Yep, people who are willing and capable. Is some of it is going to be, if it's your first time, it's going. Because I remember it is the first time doing a force on force is very uncomfortable.
It's
It
intimidating, no question.
it's very uncomfortable because what is going through your head is, am I the one thing that's probably going through your head is, am I the one dumbass here? That
No,
I don't know.
we're all dumbasses, man.
Right, and like and you might have to get over that because there is always the, man, I don't want to show up to a force on force training and be that guy. And then so that's one element.
For
Another
sure.
element that makes force on force training, that can make force on force training difficult, is um it's the appearance of it, the appearance of its accessibility. I think that can be a challenge for some people. It's like, you have Darcy or you have nothing. Wrong. There are plenty of other options.
Oh
Figure it
yeah,
out. Uh,
absolutely.
I
Cowan
think
does
so.
great force on force. MDFI does great force on force. We do great force on force. Alliance
Mhm.
does great force on force. There's lots of force on force, and that's
There's
I
a
mean that's just the tip of the iceberg in fucking middle America.
Yeah, but I will come to this statement, is that the availability of classes of force on force has only expanded in the last 5 years, and I don't think the awareness of it has caught up.
I think you're right.
I think some people thought force on force was going to be like the new paintball. People were going to love it. It was going to hit the market. It was going to be like, everyone's going to want to do this now. And the answer is no. No, it's not, because it takes an extremely large amount of resources to put on. In fact, and that, or it can either, or it feels like it could be substituted by a bunch of people and airsoft guns. And
The
neither
problem
of
is
those.
obviously it can be right, but skills validation to actually
Mhm.
test your skills and find out where you are is a very intimidating thing, and you have to have a willingness. You have to have a student's heart. You have to be humble and to understand. Like I'm not here to win. I'm here to learn.
Yes. I think I think that I think there are different things that I would gain from grabbing my tactical friends and going and doing CQB airsoft guns with each other, would provide one level of one style, one type of feedback, and then the other type would be at a course that I went to for force on force, because the instructor doesn't know me, he has his things to learn, I get to learn from him, he has his things to teach, he or she has their things to teach, whatever it is today. Because, but I'm looking with the benefit of retrospect, and I have gained. I'll tell you, I have I don't enjoy going to a force on force class every time. I don't enjoy it. I've gone to a
Agreed.
few, and I don't enjoy it, and I don't enjoy it for some reasons. And then, but usually after that first, like, maybe, the first little bit of it, after the beginning, then it starts to make sense. And I think one of the challenges that force and force has dealt with, like anything in our culture, is it was, for a while it was new, and because it was new, it was sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally proposed to solve all problems. And it's like, it doesn't solve all problems. It
No,
fixes a lot. So
it
it helps a lot.
reveals. What it does is it reveals the areas that need work. It's not
Hmm.
fixing them, it's just unearthing them. It's just uncovering them and saying, hey, you need to work on low light PID. Hey, you need
Hmm.
to work on your verbal skills. Hey, you need to work on your marksmanship, whatever that is, right?
Hmm.
Force on force will reveal your weaknesses. It doesn't fix them. It just reveals them. And now you have to go to the other training, the other range sessions, the other work to fix those things.
Yes, and or there and then or it reveals things that you cannot discover in like flat range scenarios, and one of them would be something like what's an example for me that hit out pretty strong was that like um when I got confronted, my initial posture was too weak, and then it was corrected to be strong. In other words, like I would see we would be in a scenario. I would know it's a scenario, and I would watch the thoughts go through my head of what I should do, but what I think I should do, and then what I should do. What's the correct answer? And so it was like, I know it's a bit meta, but it was like, well, the right answer is to leave out the back door and not be part of it. But the other right answer is to that guy's robbing the building. Shoot him in the back of the head. Or like, I don't want to get into a violent confrontation with this guy.
So that is definitely one of the problems people run into in force on force is that they're trying to win force on force. They're trying to win the scenario, doing exactly what they think I want. What it is that I want as an instructor in force on force is for you to do what it is that you would do. But people really have a hard time with that, right? And so people are in basically, I mean, 3 categories is a little bit unfair, but it simplifies things, right? People are either low responders. They don't act very often. They act very only when it's to defend themselves or their family. People are mid responders. They'll act half the time. You know, they're not high actors, but they're gonna intervene in a number of scenarios. Or myself, I'm a high responder, right? That's force on force has proven to me I'm a high responder. I will fucking fight anybody, anytime, anywhere if they're wrong. I want to win and I want to fight. And if you're doing bad guy shit, I want to end you, right? A lot of force on force instructors are like me. They're high responders. And the result is then they think that you should be a high responder too. And that's not correct, right? You are what you are. And my job is not to make you what I am. My job is to show you ways to be what you are that are more effective, right?
Yeah, because I'm definitely a mid responder. Like I'm definitely like if I know I'm in a scenario, I will look. If I know when I'm in a scenario, you know, like in a force on force scenario or a force on force environment, I am either psychotic, not psychotic. That's not the right way of saying it. That's now someone's going to clip that and I'm going to prison. But when I
they have no evidence.
You can't handle the truth. My name is Tom Cruise. I find myself doing one of two things. If I'm breaching a building and I'm using CQB, if I'm like in that posture, that is one version of me. But if I'm in the role of the citizen and I know I'm in a scenario, I'm like, okay, that guy's probably the person, and then I'll strategically position myself in a way where like I get to observe, and then I'll wait, and then I'll act, and then I'll leave.
Observation and avoidance are absolutely legitimate tactics. They're legitimate tactics. They're not my tactics, but they're legitimate tactics.
Yep, but if I'm in a, so like it's weird because it's a bit of a binary on that one of like this is what I learned about myself through force on force training is that if I'm going in to clear a house, I'm very much so one person. When I am not going in to clear a house, I'm a different person. I act differently.
Does that have to do with when you're working in a team environment than when you're working solo, or is it just when you're in CQB mindset versus self-defense mindset?
It's a little bit more of like, am I going to hunt something, or am I in a human dynamic environment, right? Am I in a position where I like, because it's almost like the justified switch, and this is where I have challenges with it, is because like it's not my favorite. My favorite, I am not the best at grappling, right? Like any sort of like just jujitsu, CQB, jujitsu kind of stuff. That is not my strength. Am I capable? Yes. Is it my strength? No. And
Sure.
so, like I'm going to kind of play things different ways. And
I'm going to go
so,
to jujitsu when we're done.
goody. Uh with the bourbon. So,
Oh, all the
but
bourbon. I'm driving too.
oh no. So I will, but you get but the way I've found, I was only able to find out that about myself through Force on Force.
Yep.
And so I
Absolutely.
think, and so that's good to hear then. Like, it's good to hear that Force on Force is more available. And now I get to see it from my position, but I'm trying to expand it a little bit more. I'm trying to learn more,
You got to come
especially
hang
as
out
like
with us, man. Come on out.
I will. We will make a
You
date for it.
won't. You're a liar.
I probably am. I mean, I t- I talk enough, therefore what I say must not be true. It's just the unfortunate reality of it. I try to be honest about what we say
I'm
though.
gonna bug you. I'll bug you till you come out. It'll be okay.
We'll make it. We can make some things happen. We'll put some projects together. Maybe we'll do something. I like that idea. But
That'd be
before we
fun.
kind of, we don't have to. But so that being said, like what we've kind of covered the main things that I was thinking about talking about earlier. And I wanted to open up the floor a little bit to anything else we wanted to kind of talk about, like whether it's kind of this is going to be coming out in March. That means the brace ruling is marching along. We haven't heard that get concluded yet. There's a little bit of looking at what gun culture as a whole. You've been training for 4 years. In some people's books, that makes it very new. So be it, kind of
It's
thing.
hours, not years, man. Hours, not years.
Agreed. And so instead of this being a conversation about who's the cool guy in the room and who has the better pedigree, what I would like to hear from you is like, where do you see, what has changed in the last 5 years, and what are things that you have learned while you're doing it that really stood out? Like, okay, I used to think this way, now I think this way. What are some of those examples?
Yeah, man. I think the easiest answer to that question is right. Like before I started training, I would watch the videos on the YouTube, the T-Rex arms, the Sage Dynamics, and I thought that training was all about being fast on the trigger, right? Fast, accurate, well, accurate, like A zone, B zone, maybe a little C zone, right? Like accurate,
Hmm.
like fast on the trigger, looking cool shit. And what I'm finding is that if I go slower and make legitimate T-box hits, legitimate upper high thoracic hits, I end up threatening 2 shots versus 6 shots that weren't where they needed to be. Um, I like going slow. Going slow and doing it right is way better than going fast and doing it wrong. And that's been the biggest thing for me in training is realizing that like the stuff that looks cool on Instagram and the stuff that's actually effective in a fight are not the same thing.
They're not always the same thing. Although I'm going to defend it a little bit, is that that's gun culture, right? Like we are maturing in that aspect of, okay, yeah, I think most people in gun culture are able to sort out what's trying to be cool and what's trying to be practical.
I, I think I think
Ah,
that's not true. I don't know about most people, man. I think there's a percentage of people, but it's like a third.
okay. Well, I mean,
I
that's
mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not.
given. No, no,
There's no point to get in a fight about this, right? But like, I think that
I'm
most people get sucked into what's sexy, and they want to spend their time doing what's sexy. But what's sexy and what's right are not always the same.
yes, I think in their defense, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort out what that looks like. What is the distinction? How do we know one versus the other? Where's this coming out? Because again, this goes back to that is ought divide. You can tell me the thing about looking fast on the internet is that it's demonstratable, right? I know what the metric is. I know that this guy can consistently hit A zone shots in zero point 0.8 seconds, and that one's 0.9. The zero point 0.8
Right?
seconds guy's faster. It's a measurable thing.
Can
Not
he do that when he
everything.
has the PID?
Not everything is measurable. Like not everything
Can
is
he do that when he doesn't know for sure it's a shoot target?
probably not.
Absolutely not, right? Like it
You
goes if
know,
it all falls apart when decision making gets entered into it.
but decision making is not do you think can decision making can be broken down into raw metrics that then can be measured perfectly every time? Or is that what we
No,
call the field of gray? It is.
It probably is the field of gray. I would agree with that.
Mhm. Yeah, because that's where I think a lot of gun culture is that some people you take, gun culture as a whole, it's all of us. Americana as a whole, it's all of us. And then you take gun culture and there's the younger people and the middle-aged people and the older people. And you got the FUDs and the Zoomers and the whatever, right? You got the little blah, 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 blah. You can fight your categories all you want. And so
Heat cannon.
yeet cannon, bruh. So, for real, no cap, whatever the phrase is these days. I have now made myself the enemy of 3/4 of the internet because I gave into the joke. But the point being said on that one is internet. I'm sorry, is like, yes, I can look on the internet and see something's cool, and many people are working on distinguishing that. How do we develop that more? Because I can tell you, oh, that's just to look cool, and this is practical, right? But how do we as a culture mature that part better? I think that's where a lot of our focus is, so that we can, because quite frankly, I'm
There's
not
only one
interested.
answer.
Just
There's
go
only
out and
one
do it.
answer to that question. Is you have to go get professional training from nationally recognized instructors.
Okay.
You want to know how to do night vision right? Well, you have to train with TNVC. You have to train with Green Line Tactical, right? Like your buddy who had used night vision in the Marines one time 15 years ago is not the answer to that question,
Okay.
right? And like, does it make you better than you are now? Maybe, but does it make you industry standard? No, it does not.
Ah. There is, so okay, I see how that goes. I see that. So industry standard, you're talking about there's sort of a baseline that needs to be met. I mean, we're talking about measuring people's skill sets between each other too, and I think that gets a little thick milky.
It
It's
does get muddy, right? For sure.
there is because, like, okay, you were at SHOT Show this year and I was at SHOT Show, and this is where we met, and then it was like, holy shit, we had this great conversation. Now we'll have two, so check. But a marked distinction that has been made from multiple people is that this SHOT Show had a lot less of what we'd call dick measuring, a lot less of it. And I think that's a step in the right direction. It doesn't mean that it's not going to we're not going to have different hierarchies come out of things. It's not like it's going to go away completely. But the question then is going to be, all right, now what? Okay, we've suppressed a little bit of the ego of the industry. Now what?
The dick
And
measuring is generational.
okay,
The fucking Gen Z and the millennials are not looking to measure each other against themselves against each other the way that the boomers were.
okay,
And we're starting to see, right? Like there's a lot of fucking boomers at SHOT Show, man. There's a
yes,
lot of
no, they
them.
are.
But they don't actually represent the community anymore.
They don't. Yeah,
They're the guys who own the businesses, but they are
some of
not
the
the guys
businesses.
who buy the goods.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
I think
Well,
to
they
a
they
great
they
degree that dick measuring is going away with that generation.
I agree that I agree with you there. A lot of it is going away with that generation. A lot of it is. Not all of it. Some of it will find a way to find its way in, but a lot of it is going away. Absolutely.
There's always going to be a part of that. Right? Like I'm X. I'm assuming you're millennial, right? Like
Yep.
I don't look at the world the way my dad does. My dad's a boomer. I don't see the world like he does.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think the thing though, I think what we get to, I don't think it's necessarily a difference between the Gen X or the boomers and the millennials because of like who their generation is. I think millennials have so much information at hand. It's one of the good things, right?
A more informed generation, of course. We're the first Gen X. We're the first internet generation.
You are. Yeah, I was
And
I'm
you guys are the true internet generation, right? We're the first internet generation, but you guys are the true internet generation. And information makes a huge difference.
access to information being different than the evaluation of information. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because there was a time where if it was printed in a newspaper, it could be used as authoritative. Now it's like which newspaper, which author.
Bullshit, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, that newspaper is discredited. Well, you're a Republican,
They're
so you
just trying
don't
to get me to
count.
wear a fucking mask, right? Yeah.
Are you Canadian? Are you also Canadian? Were you also
No,
kicked out of?
Minnesota, so I sound like it.
Oh, don't you know? So,
Oh dear.
oh dear, there. Yeah, I mean, so a little. It's a funny thing too that you're saying that So Minnesotans are referred to oftentimes as being passive aggressive, right?
Yeah, they are. I'm not from there. I'm from Michigan. I moved there. Fuck those guys.
Oh, never mind. That explains so much. I was like, how did you
Yeah,
and
we
me
we hit
both?
hard in Michigan. We hit you fucking hard.
I was like, how did you, a Minnesotan, be like a full aggression all the time guy? I've met a
No,
couple of us.
I am a full aggression all the guy. You read that right. I'm full aggression all
Mhm.
the time. I used to
Oh,
fight people in cages. I fought people in rings, and I'm going to jiu-jitsu right after this.
Lord have mercy on your victims. Jiu-jitsu. Okay, so jiu-jitsu is really popular within gun culture. Let's kind of wrap this up and give me a 5-minute intro into like jiu-jitsu because it's a trend in gun culture. How long have you been doing it? Are you newer? Or are you more experienced? What's your take on it for our
Yeah, so
society? Not for the
I'm
gun owner, because gun owners should know how to do more than just shoot, but for like our society.
man, I don't give a shit about society. Like I don't think about like that. But like for me, I started MMA in 2007. I fought MMA in '08. I fought some kickboxing in '09, and I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu right now. I've been doing gi jiu-jitsu since 2016, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a responsible citizen, you need to know how to defend yourself in intermediate force. You need to know how to defend yourself in deadly force. You need to know how to defend yourself with verbals. You need to know how to fucking defend yourself. So if that
Mm-hmm.
means yelling at a guy and making him scared, awesome. If that means punching a guy in the face and winning a fight, awesome. If that means choking a guy unconscious or breaking his arm or taking his heel home, awesome. If that means shooting a guy in the face who needs shot in the face, awesome. I believe it is our responsibility to be able to defend ourselves in any situation, in any level of force, anytime, drunk,
Mm-hmm.
sober, or otherwise.
There you go. Answer complete. I mean, it is sufficient. I've run into the challenge of not the challenge of I've run into the jujitsu thing is like I know it's trendy right now, and that's not necessarily a bad
I've been
thing.
doing it so long it wasn't trendy, right? Like,
Fair enough. No, and so I would, and that's definitely on my list of like things to get better at. Probably not, it's on my list. I guess. How do I
it's
close it
fun.
off that way?
I mean, like, there's a brotherhood in jujitsu. Just like we haven't talked about this, but there's a brotherhood in training, right? Like
Okay.
I train with the same guys over and over again. These guys are my fucking brothers, man. I drive across the country to help them out. I
Mm-hmm.
would send them hundreds of dollars to help them out. Like these are my guys. I would take care of them. These guys matter to me. And the
Mm-hmm.
same is true in jujitsu. In my local gym, these guys are my brothers. I tell them I love them. Like I'm 43 years old. I did not grow up being told I love you every 5 minutes. I tell these guys I love you every single day we roll together. Like these people matter and they're important. And for me, it's worth my time. And
This
I'm
you
also
said
drunk.
that.
So
Oh, you'll be fine. There's a
I'm
brotherhood in
not.
training. There's a brotherhood in training. Do you think this is the thing that people are really looking for in gun culture?
I hope so, man. I really hope so. Like the benefit of the brotherhood is it pushes you to be better, right? If
Mm-hmm.
these guys are really your brothers, they don't let it be okay that you fucking do shit wrong. They don't let it be okay that you're good enough, right? We constantly push each other to be better. We constantly hold each other accountable to move to the next level, right? To add the next layer, the next piece, whatever that is. If it's breaching, if it's CQB, if it's you can't shoot a pistol for shit, I'm going to hold you accountable to shoot a pistol, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're supposed to be brothers with each other, and I have never found a family like I have found in training. Right, I come to Alliance, Ohio, over and over and over again because Joe Wire, SWAT commander of Alliance Police Department, runs Alliance Police Training, has become my mentor. That has become I'm in a house right now that I rent from that man, so I can come here twice a month and learn under him because he is so valuable to me. It's so important to me that I'll come here and spend all my money. I'll spend all my time learning what he's got to teach. That's a brotherhood like no other, man. And obviously, I'm a little drunk right now. I'm a little
No,
red.
it's
I'm having a little fun. But that guy's my brother. I spent all last
yeah.
night with him just hanging out because he has poured so much into my life. And if you can find that in training, you won't find that anywhere else. Jiu-jitsu and firearms training.
I think, yeah. So this is me being the veteran speaking. Is that when you hear about people talk about being a veteran, they talk about things like the brotherhood, and they talk about being like you're part of something bigger than yourself, and they
Absolutely.
talk about things like, oh, it's not really about the job, it's about the camaraderie, and like, yeah, I'm not saying that that's all garbage. What I'm saying is that if you're joining the military for the camaraderie, you might be disappointed
Yeah,
because,
that's a bit of a life commitment that training is not, right? Like,
well, no, you might be disappointed in the sense of like camaraderie doesn't come naturally or that easy for everybody or all the time, but it doesn't mean that it can't be attained and achieved and pursued. That's kind of that's the tricky one at the end is like, oh, well, I joined the military for the camaraderie and I didn't find it, so I got out. Okay.
but
I mean,
it's an investment piece, right? Like the investment of joining the military, that's a big investment. That's 4 years of
yeah.
your life, 4 fucking years of your life, man, minimum, right? That's a
Yes,
huge
but
investment.
yeah, but
Investment
like
of
you
training,
wouldn't you want to
hours.
wouldn't you want the people that you are calling your brotherhood to be like invested
I
with you? I mean, you're not.
what I'm getting at, what I'm getting
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
is you have to invest a huge amount of your life on the hope that you find brothers there.
Yes.
In training, you invest 30 hours.
Hmm.
And if you find brothers, fucking awesome. And if you don't, you move on. 30 fucking
And it's
hours of your life. That's it.
And it's a deliberate approach. You just have to
That's
deliberately
it.
choose. Okay. Yeah. I
And
mean, that's I'm not s
if you don't, you move on to the next company, the next training environment, the next place, the next range, whatever. You'll
Mhm.
find them. They exist. There are brothers for you out there. There are guys that want to hold you accountable. There are guys that want to come to your local range and work with you. They exist. You will find them. It might not be the first place or the second place, but you will find them. In the military, you invest 4 years of your life to find that, and you find it. Like you have
Maybe,
brothers from that
maybe.
time in your life.
I have
Yeah,
a
but
few.
like 80% of guys find that, right? Like you find that. Whether it's not everybody, it's a couple guys. But those guys will matter for the rest of your life. The rest of your life. That's the thing, man. In training, you might not find rest of your life brothers, but you train enough and you'll find some guys that matter for a couple years. They're a big part of your life for a couple years. It'll matter.
It's I think that's what's changing in gun culture is that we've moved away, and this is something so good, is that we've moved away from this atomized, isolated, attitude to a lot more community focused, and I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Let's use that as kind of a closing bit then, because that's good. That's a good way to. I think that's a really good note to leave on. It's just that the whole training thing is sometimes you just have to get over yourself and you have to go do it, and then be humbled a little bit, or maybe that humility is not found in your skill set; it's on your attitude.
A
Maybe
hundred
it's the way
percent,
that
man. A hundred
maybe
percent.
the attitude is how you look at other people, and you're like, oh man, I'm kind of the dick here. So
Someone's got to be.
someone's got to be. Well, in our case, Tim, it's you. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm not
It's
hurting you
true.
too
It
much.
always. No, you're good. It's always me, man.
Oh no, Minnesotan passive aggressive. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Yeah. So
I'm
that,
not Minnesota nice. I'm Michigan asshole.
yeah, yeah. Well, that is clear. That is clear. It is known as the great as quoted in the Game of Thrones. It is known. All right. So where do people find you, Tim? How do they find you? Where's everything going from here?
Yeah, man. Defensemechanisms.com, defensiveelements.com. If you have
Mm-hmm.
questions about our gear, it's defensive contact at defensemechanisms.com. All of the social medias, the YouTubes, the whatnot. I'm sure there's an email on the Defensive Elements website. It escapes me at this moment in time, but if you want to train and money's a problem, just contact us through the website defensiveelements.com. We want you out there more than we want your money. I'm not trying to get rich off training. I'm trying to make people better. I would rather have you there for free than not have you there at all.
All righty. Well, we'll keep that in, and we'll now people know how to find you, and I look forward to seeing what comes because we'll have a conversation about this. We'll do a follow up and see what's the next 6 months and what's life is going on because this show has no intent of closing shop. So, all right, Tim. Well, I'll close this off then. If you are still listening to our show, thank you very much for listening to the Redacted Culture Cast. If you're going to stick around for the conclusion and you still want to support the show, that is redactedculture.locals.com. That is where you can subscribe to our show, make things, keep the lights on, keep everything running. Otherwise, you can always pick up merch from us, and that's at redactedllc.com. That is where you find our merch. If you are familiar with season 1, Operation 1, we had a unique merch line that came live with that. We are doing the same thing this time around. It will be a merch line unique to that operation. We're also looking at making sure we have some redacted shirts in stock too. Other than that, Tim, it's been great to have you on. We will talk to you later, and we will see you soon. So take care.